What's up, everybody, and welcome back to a brand new episode. You are not going to believe what happened to me today. I picked up this hat off of the internet. Once it finally came in, I put the hat on, and now I have time traveled back to the past. I have no idea when the hell I am, but I do know one thing. I am really glad that I picked out this spare shirt today. So according to my phone, it's out of service. But according to the Dollar General employee, I am in the year 1973, which means not only did I time travel to 2 decades before my conception, but I also wasn't able to avoid seeing a Dollar General on every single street corner. I can't be stuck in the past. The only thing I'm good at is bitching about not having a new F-Zero game and talking about video games. So what the hell am I gonna do now?
Nintendo, the biggest video game company in the world, the developers and minds behind some of the most iconic characters in all of gaming history. Mario, Zelda, Donkey Kong, Pit, Kirby, Yoshi, Samus, Lucina, Toadsworth, General Pepper, Madoki Tsukimori, that one guy who was stuck on the island in Super Mario Sunshine but eventually gets off, but once he does, he actually misses being on the island, and Mahjong on the Famicom.
Who could forget about Mahjong on the Famicom?
Nintendo has, without a doubt, maintained the status of being the definitive masters of video game production, essentially the Disney of the video game world, and that's not just because you could find Epic Mickey in the bargain bin at any Dollar General around 2015. When you play a Nintendo game, there's a certain charm and feeling that the company manages to capture that you just can't get from any other video game company. Even if you have 2 games that are from completely different genres and have almost no parallels in their gameplay, you can still pick these games up and get the feeling that, alright, this is a Nintendo game, even though these 2 games were made by the same developers less than 1 year apart. This is why Nintendo has maintained their status as a dominant force in the video game industry. They put the focus on creating memorable experiences first to make timeless classics that still hold up from generation to generation. But what about the generations of early Nintendo? Nintendo has been around since the late 1800s for over 125 years, so what was Nintendo like before they made video games?
Since I have some time to kill, I figured why not take a look at Nintendo's life before video games while I travel back to the present. I think I might have a problem here.
Alright, so before Donkey Kong in 1981 and Game & Watch in 1980, we have to go all the way back to 1889 with a gentleman named Yamauchi Fusahiro, founder of the aptly named Yamauchi Nintendo Company. The name Nintendo is rumored to have come from the Japanese kanji meaning leave luck to heaven or leave fate to heaven. However, there's no actual evidence to suggest this to be true, as it can also be translated to the Tree of Hanafuda, Hanafuda being the playing cards that Nintendo made a name for themselves by selling. These are Hanafuda. For those who aren't aware, they are a Japanese style of playing cards that have a lot of similarities to American playing cards. For example, I take one look at these things and still don't know what the f to do. Hanafuda means flower cards, which, taking one look at these things, it rightfully makes sense. Most cards depict flowers, animals, or many other different culturally significant scenes, such as the Japanese Star Festival or Japanese deities. There are a good number of games you can play with these sets as well. Apparently, most of the games involve matching up sets to other cards or taking control of the deck, similar to American card games, but come on, I can barely read English. You expect me to make sense of this? The difference between these and a standard deck of cards is easy to spot. No face cards, no numbers. It's purely made with the aesthetic of Japanese culture in mind, which is really cool, but just makes the media that much harder to get into. Fortunately, Nintendo still makes these cards today. I got these off of Amazon for fairly cheap, and they're surprisingly good quality. They're a lot smaller than they appear in real life, and they're fairly durable as well. Other than these, they also have character-themed ones, showing off Donkey Kong, Mario, Kirby, 130 years later, and they still haven't left their traditional family roots. This was Nintendo's business for the good beginning of its life, 60 years in fact, before we'd see a departure from the playing card industry. In the meantime, Yamauchi Nintendo was taken over by Fusahiro's son-in-law Sekiro Kaneda in 1929, renaming the company to Yamauchi Nintendo & Co. after a joint venture with another company in 1933. Soon after that, his son-in-law Shikanojo Inaba was offered the company, but refused and was subsequently given to his son Hiroshi Yamauchi, the longest sitting president for Nintendo to date, and the man responsible for building Nintendo into what it was today. See, Hiroshi was a businessman. He wasn't afraid to take risks, and in 1959 soon found himself in talks with Disney to create a brand new line of playing cards based off the iconic Disney characters. These cards were a huge success and led Yamauchi to consider more business ideas for the company. With the influx of cash coming in, the card company could be so much more, and soon Nintendo would go on to do all sorts of things, creating their own taxi service, food business, and even a vacuum cleaner named Cheery Tori that would later be referenced in plenty of WarioWare games like WarioWare Gold for the 3DS. But you know what wasn't referenced in WarioWare Gold?
Sex.
Yes, Nintendo had a stint with love hotels. It's exactly what you think, a rental hotel where guests can engage in
sex.
40 years before they became the family company. Can you imagine being conceived here? With the advancement of modern technology, the playing card industry just wasn't sustainable anymore. They needed a new hit idea to take the company to resounding success, and they needed it fast. And thus enters one of the most prolific names in Nintendo's history, Gunpei Yokoi. Yokoi was a low-level grunt working at a Hanafuda card company at the time. He was the maintenance man and had invented a small extended arm for his amusement on the production line. When touring the factory one day, Yamauchi came across Yokoi's device, liked the idea, and one promotion later, the Ultra Hand was born, what many would consider to be the beginning of Nintendo's legacy as the family company. The Ultra Hand was Nintendo's biggest success since Hanafuda cards and skyrocketed Nintendo into the toy industry. They were up against some big names now, like Bandai. Huh. Irony. After Yokoi was pulled from the assembly line to work as a game designer for Nintendo, he came up with some of the best revolutionary toys in Japan's history. There's the Ultra Machine. This was a pitching device for kids that was mass-produced for home use and actually makes a cameo in WarioWare's baseball minigame. There's the Love Tester, a device used to determine how much two gullible middle schoolers love each other. Two people would grab one of the spherical metal sensors with one hand and it would give you a score of 1 to 100 based on how much the machine assessed that you loved each other. I'm sensing a pattern here, but I think the most recognizable and influential toy that Nintendo ever came up with was the Beam Gun, released in 1970. And son of a bitch, it was on WarioWare Gold. The Beam Gun is a solar-powered light gun. It wasn't the first of its kind, but it was the first that was widely available. I'm sure you've seen it before. It looks just like Duck Hunt, except it works on your wall rather than, say, an arcade machine. There are plenty of other toys that came out during this time period as well. You had Twister, a Japanese version of the American game of the same name. You had Hip Flip, a game where you move your hips to swing around a swinging bell that was marketed towards kids, but more or less turned into a prepubescent boy's wet dream. Baby strollers for when families were done with their visits to the love hotels, model guns, a Mach Rider machine. There are plenty of things that Nintendo dove into before video games. But all of that would change, and it all started in the early 1970s.
Hey, that's where I am. Found out an answer to my problem, by the way. It looks like these bad boys run off of AAA batteries. Who would have thought? Good thing for me, I always come prepared, which is why I always keep a spare supply of batteries in my right shoe. These are AA's.
With the rise of early video game entertainment, Nintendo explored what they called the laser clay shooting system. This was more like a large-scale version of the beam gun mentioned before. Nintendo would rent out these abandoned bowling alleys to set up projector screens, and I tried really hard but could not find any footage of this whatsoever, but essentially it worked kind of like Duck Hunt on a bowling screen wall, except players would use their foot to trigger the pull rather than it be automated. Of course, with another large-scale investment, this barely paid off, almost bankrupting the company yet again, but thankfully they found success in the video entertainment industry with this foot in the door, and soon after acquired the publishing rights for the Magnavox Odyssey here in America.
And the rest is history, from the playing card game to a toy manufacturer, all the way to the video games that we know today. Nintendo has had a longer lifespan than both Sony and Microsoft combined, but what's most amazing about Nintendo is the fact that through all of this, the heart and creativity of what makes a Nintendo product has been apparent since the very beginning. Especially the sex hotels.
When you think of Nintendo, sure you might think of anti-piracy, bad motion controls, timed exclusives, shitty price points, limited exclusivity, the lack of a virtual console on Switch, Wario, but at the heart of it all, Nintendo has always had a focus on fun. And that's extremely fucking corny. Looking back at their history, it's obvious that the heart and soul of a family-owned company has always been there, and although that may have deteriorated over the years, it's still a core value at the heart of Nintendo. It's just really deep in there and really hard to spot. I mean, really hard to spot. Plenty of Nintendo's history is still here today. Of course, we have the Hanafuda cards and micro games, but the Ultra Hand had its own game on the Wii titled Grill Off with Ultra Hands. Clubhouse Games has Hanafuda included as part of the 51 games in the collection, and I still don't know what the fuck I'm doing. There was a whole world of Nintendo before Mario's existence, but with websites like BeforeMario.com and museums across the world, part of this early history can still be preserved and still carry on the legacy of a company that's still here today, but just doesn't exist anymore. I know most people are more concerned with what golf outfit Waluigi is wearing, because I mean, just look at him, but Where was I going with this?
Alright, took me long enough, but I finally managed to make some AAA batteries. Thank goodness, the static was starting to give me a headache anyways. Past might be great and all with its affordable healthcare and much better home systems, but come on! The president has Pikmin. How do they still not have a new F-Zero game? If there's one thing I always prepare for, it's please stop dropping the batteries. I just want to be done. My foot is soaking wet right now.